Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30, and I can confirm that the streaming and recording is on. You may begin your meeting whenever you like.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I see that we have enough councils to we have quorum. So I will call to order this committee of the whole meeting on Monday, November 29th, 2021, budgetary meeting. Next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging us reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda for the November 29th, 2021 special meeting of committee be adopted as circulated to you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, after viewing any omissions or additions to this agenda by any member of council? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote will begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Okay, after viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have so noted. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to the department reports, and we do have a presentation for corporate services being presented by the treasurer, Ms. Quinlan Murphy.
Okay, thank you. Treasurer Teresa Quinlan Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to share my screen. And can everyone see that now?
We can here at town. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. So I'm very happy to be here tonight to present the 2022 capital budgets. I will be sharing the presentation with Charlotte Tunikaitis, the Manager of Financial Services and Deputy Treasurer, and Jason Marr, the Director of Public Works. The agenda, we're going to talk about the proposed capital budgets, debentures and debt, reserve and reserve funds, and the open house capital request. So this is a summary of all of the capital budgets for 2022. And we're going to go through the various categories. What I want to highlight here is that the actual proposed budgets in comparison to 2021 are almost $5 million higher, 4.7 to be exact. And the increase is coming from an increase in the development charges of $2.3 million, an additional $2 million coming out of the reserves. So this just shows you the tremendous amount of activity that we're projecting to do next year. And with regards to grants, there's $3.8 million of grants, of which almost 2.7 of these grants have been confirmed and approved. And we have $1.1 million of grants that right now are in submission. We're waiting for approval. And so these projects that are waiting for approval are red circled in the budget package. So red circle means that the projects will not move forward unless we have the grant funding. And so this is the list that we have here. Are there any questions relating to the grants that we have listed? I do want to point out the Canada Community Building Fund. This is the gas tax. The name has changed. That we received double the gas tax in 2021, and we carried forward the $521,661 from 2021 to the 2022 project. So that has helped to alleviate some of the capital pressures that we have. So that was really, really good news from the province to double the gas tax in 2021. And we hope that, in the future they continue to do that. And I think the big hope is that when they receive all of the asset management plans from all the municipalities, which are due in July 1st of 2022, I hope that information to the province really acknowledges the amount of deferred maintenance that all the municipalities have, and that the funding that they provide to the municipalities really needs to be increased. So we're hoping that once they receive that information, they'll acknowledge that, the doubling of the gas tax or other grants are extremely important to the municipalities in order for us to address the maintenance, the deferred maintenance in the assets of the municipality. So I will stop here and see if anyone has any particular questions on the grants that we have listed, or any other questions related to the funding, the finances.
Any questions from councillors on what Ms. Quinlan Murphy has stated so far, especially on the grants portion? Do you see any, Madam Clerk?
No, I do not, but we do only see about 5 squares. So if a councillor does have a question, if you'd like to speak, then the square should pop up for us.
Yes, you're going to have to shout out verbally because we can't see all of council. Not hearing anything, Ms. Quinlan Murphy, please continue.
Okay, so the first budget that we're going to look at, the first category is information technology. A lot of these items on here are regular renewal items that every year come to council. And if there are any specific questions, they're listed here. I have the manager of IT, Mike, on the Zoom meeting, so he can answer any specific technical questions that anyone may have.
Okay. Any questions from any councillors on the information technology proposed budget? Not hearing anything, Madam Treasurer?
Okay, the next one is the fire and bylaws services budget. The biggest item that's here and new this year is the Rescue One truck, and if there are any specific questions, the fire chief is here to answer any questions related to his capital budgets.
Not seeing any or hearing any, although I do have a question for the chief, if I may. Chief, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Oh, excellent. So it says in the report that it's a heavy rescue and there's structural problems with it. I guess I just want to be sure going ahead that if this isn't I hope it's a past policy, and if it isn't, I hope this one can be put in going forward, and that is the undercoating of all the police services vehicles. Do you know if that's is that something that we do religiously on a steady basement or on a steady schedule? And wonder if you could just answer that.
It's run by the Public Works Department. The mechanic, I know that they do undercoat the vehicles. I don't think it's every year. I don't know if the manager of Public Works, Ryan Cook, is on the line. He could answer that more than I can.
Mr. Cook, are you there? Perhaps not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, he's not on the call today.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Just if staff could maybe get back to council on that, if that is indeed a steady a program that we have, and because obviously these trucks when they do go out in the wintertime and then they go back into a heated bay, it's supposed to be a not a very good platform for them to be in. I was just wondering if that is something we do as a matter of policy. That's fine. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Oh, Councillor Corr?
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, to the chief. When we're looking at this number of 600,000, are we looking at a brand new one, a used one? And are we buying Canadian or US?
Chief?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a new vehicle. The RFPs that we put out are to Canadian companies. The chassis, part of the truck is part of actually all fire vehicles. Certain portions of them are built in the States, but they are ultimately finished and completed within a Canadian company. So they're definitely will be more likely Ontario.
And one final question to the chief. How many companies build rescue vehicles in Ontario or in Canada?
Off the top of my head, there's probably 6. It could be more. Could be the ones I can think of. There's 6 right now, but there's probably more than that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Don't forget you have to shout out, please.
Councillor Stewart, I think.
Councillor Stewart, is that you?
She's muted.
I'm having a very hard time hearing you.
Councillor Stewart, you're muted right now. If you could just
Yeah,
unmute yourself.
okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if the truck that we currently have will remain in service, and if not, will it be sold off to help defray the cost?
Chief?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, the vehicle in question will not remain in service. The mechanic has indicated that the condition of the vehicle will not pass safety in 2022, so it'll be taken out of service and it will be put on Gov's Deal like a website and sold as is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Not hearing any. Madam Clerk, Madam Treasurer?
Okay, so this next section, I'm going to pass it to the Director of Public Works, and he can talk about all the Public Works projects.
Okay. Director of Public Works, Mr. Murray, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to walk us through the capital budgets that are related to Public Works items. Some I'm going to go into some more detail on, specifically the roads and water and wastewater projects. Other than that, we'll take the same approach that we did with the corporate services and the fire capital budgets and take a look at the overall screenshot. And if anybody has any questions, they can ask them at that time. So the facilities capital budget, we have a number of facilities, our largest being the MCC. And these values here, they were based on an old assessment that was completed, I believe back in 2016, that showed that the replacement value of our assets, we had a $50 million replacement value and a deferred maintenance cost of about $5 million. We did complete a new study in 2020. It actually finished in the spring of 2021. And our value of our assets have gone up. These numbers are a little bit old and I don't have new data to share with council, but they have changed a little bit. I wanted to make that point of clarification on this slide. But overall, we are a little over $50 million in assets with fairly substantial deferred revenue and maintenance costs associated with those assets. Next slide. This is a screenshot of our town facilities capital budget. The largest project is FAC 0722. And that is a project that would see a new addition to Town Hall here at Peace Park. The value of that is 1.2 million and makes up the majority of this budget. It's also red circled and would only be, I guess, considered in the event that we received approval on the grant funding. At this time, I'll take any questions from council with respect to any individual projects.
Okay.
I have a question.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Hahn, was that you?
Yes, through the mayor, I have a question. With regards to the FAC 0622, the power supply for events at the Accipiter, I'm just wondering, I realize that's just for the events, but I know many times we've had conversations in the past about generator. I'm just wondering if that's been considered, or perhaps I'm jumping ahead, but generator power for the MCC?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, with respect to the specifics related to that project, I would defer that to Ms. Bangs Ravensway. But I will comment on the generator portion of that. In the capital forecast, we have a placeholder in 2025 for a possible generator at the MCC. Council has directed staff to come back with a report with some options regarding a generator at the MCC and what the cost would be and what that would actually be used to power. Staff are in the process of bringing that report forward. It'll be most likely in early January or maybe even into February, but we have met with consultants and contractors on that, and we are working towards a report to bring to council that will lay out what the capital costs would be and what the options are with respect to the generator at the MCC.
So if that report's coming back in January, it's not forecasted then, depending on what comes back for application until 2025 then, based on that report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's just where we have it as a placeholder right now in the capital forecast. That could change with respect to when that project would be implemented. It could very well depend on grant funding that may be available at the time. Right now it's just a placeholder, and that's where it is right now in 2025.
Okay, but in theory, when the report comes back to council in the beginning of next year, then council can decide if we want to move ahead or sooner than later. As far as the funding for that, we'll first of all look for funding from an emergency management services perspective. I'm sure there's going to be different ones that are going to be coming available next year first, and then if not, then we would have to pull from some funding. I just wondered if there was some money set aside for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions concerning the director's outlay so far?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. The FAC 0722, the $2.10 million. Is there a more detailed breakdown of those expenditures? Because I just wondered if there was if there's an opportunity to sequence some of this work and avoid a payment of that size right immediately and altogether, I should say, as a cumulative number.
Director?
To you, Mr. Mayor. I'll pass this question on to Director of Corporate Services for comment.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, we have the grant submission that breaks down the cost for this. Most of this is construction. What's exciting about this grant is that $750,000 is what the grant application is, which is quite significant, and the other $460,000 is coming out of the reserves. I think the time period for this grant, if we are awarded the grant, we have a few years to actually do the work. So it'll give us some time if there are different opportunities to help fund the $460,000 that's the town's responsibility. So if you would like more details, I can provide that to you separately to council if they want of the grant. There was a report that went to council that received approval to submit this grant back in July.
Counselor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, Counselor Hildebrand.
through you, I just want to comment on FAC 0622. There really is a requirement for an additional event power transformer at the Civic Arena. What that really is we had a portable panel that was used at many events to distribute power. And that really needs to be upgraded to a proper panel. So it's really a panel. It's not a transformer that they want for the $10,000. It's a distribution panel.
Thank you for that, Counselor. I believe, is that the panel that will take the place of a long extension cord that has been used in the past?
No.
No? Okay.
No, I don't know if you remember way back when in 2019 where we had a little occurrence at the art show.
Yes, that's what I was referring to. Yes.
Yeah, it was the distribution panel and that wasn't properly inspected and we had some problems there. This is a replacement for that.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you for the clarification, Counselor.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments on the director's report so far? Not seeing any. Go ahead, Director.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we also have Parks and Beautification Department. A lot of it is under our operating budget, but some of it does fall under capital. If we go to the next slide, please. So here's our parks facilities budget. So again, I don't have any specific presentations on individual projects, but if council does have some questions with respect to this proposed budget, I'd be happy to answer them. Try to answer them. I know the Recreation Department and Wellness is also very heavily involved with this part of the budget. So this would be a tag team approach.
Okay, thank you, Director Morris.
Yes.
I see Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. I'm looking at PRK 02-22 for 270,000. Is that for the pickleball addition or just resurfacing or repairing the existing courts?
Director Moore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this would be a capital project which is only specifically related to the replacement and reconstruction of the existing playing surfaces.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. So we didn't budget anything for the pickleball people that did a presentation in early spring, if I'm not mistaken.
Director Moore?
Can I answer that?
No.
Yeah, sorry.
Wait, who's that? No, oh, it's the,
Treasurer?
yes, Director, Treasurer, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. We actually have a grant application for $480,000 for 6 pickleball courts. And when the budget was submitted, that grant application wasn't put in yet. So it's out there and it's going to be fully funded. So if we receive that grant funding, it'll be for 6 new pickleball courts at Centennial Park. The $270,000 is just to refurbish the existing tennis courts. So we're looking at the tennis courts and the pickleball courts.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I think Mr. Maher knows where I'm going. What I'm missing in this budget is my favorite project that I've been trying to get on the books for 4 years, LED light conversion. We know that in 2019 at AMO, we were told in 2020 was the last grant application opportunity that municipalities were going to have, because just about every municipality in the town in the province of Ontario, which is 444, had already converted. We were one of the few that hadn't converted, and at AMO they made it pretty clear this is the last chance. What disturbs me is the fact that this is the best greenhouse gas opportunity we have of 19 metric tons per year of gas savings. It has a forecasted return of investment in four years. So basically our hydro bill is $200,000. The projected savings is 64% on our energy bill. Our maintenance costs are escalating. Light bulbs, according to our maintenance contractor, are going from 20 to 80 bucks. So the $60,000 on maintenance is a high number. I'm going to be making a motion at the end of this presentation. But essentially, I don't want to increase our taxation rate, nor the amount of capital money we're spending. So I'm going to be asking staff to investigate ways to start this street light conversion project without increasing capital spending. If we select Hayes Street and Pelham Street for the 22 budget, Hayes has 57 lights and Pelham has 59, not counting converting center of town, which has decorative lighting. This assumes that work being done by Rankin right now does not involve new street lights. Saying if we convert 120 lights, our maintenance contractor said right now he can replace an LED light for 350 bucks and he can do the conversion for 350. So that's 700 bucks. I know that the town of Oakville did their conversion at 625 bucks per light. Say if we did convert these 120 lights on these two streets, that would be an expenditure of $84,000. So that's just under 10% of the number of lights we need to convert. And the number of lights we need to convert is approximately 1322. So obviously that's the project I'm missing on this template that I'm going to be making a motion to add to the template without increasing our tax rate or capital spending. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. I think when you bring your motion forward, the Director of Public Works has somewhat of a solution to your to the problem of the lights. But I think we'll leave that till you put your motion forward. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at this point to the Director of Public Works? Not seeing any, Mr. Marr?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So now into the meat and potatoes of the capital works budget. Roads, water, and wastewater, all tangible assets. Some you see, some you don't. Here's an overview. It's a two-pager. The roads portion makes up the majority of our capital budget. It does, to answer the councillor's previous question, in this section is where we would find the LED streetlight conversion projects. You won't see them identified on the 2022 capital budget, but they are slated in as placeholders right now in 2023 and 2024 for 2 consecutive years of LED streetlight conversion projects. And they're in our 10-year capital forecast. We can discuss this later. Just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that it is part of the roads capital budget. So there will be some more in-depth discussion on some of these projects that I thought would be useful for council's consideration. Balfour Bridge, I'll be speaking about that. The road resurfacing programs and maintenance programs. Quick discussion on that because we've done some work on that based on our recent pavement condition studies. The Quaker Road detailed design assignment and future reconstruction of that project. Campbell Road detailed design, Pelham Street, the next phase of that, as well as Effingham Road reconstruction. So I'll get into some more details on those projects and we can ask specific questions related to those projects during the presentation. But if there's anything else, any other projects that are identified in this spreadsheet that anybody has any questions on, I can answer those at this time.
Okay, thank you, Director Marr. Any questions from any councillors?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director. I'm looking at our RD 1222. What does that consist of? It's a small stretch of roadway. What are we looking at? I thought we did that 5 years, at least 5 years ago. Am I right, or do we not finish that part?
So this, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a project that would see the urbanization and reconstruction of Canberra Road from Hay Street and then down to Highway 20. So that would carry through the intersection at where those 3 or 4 roads intersect at Churchill and the road that comes off of Highway 20 and then carries down the hill on a one-way section down to Highway 20. So this is a section of road that is in need of urbanization. It's in basically in the downtown core. It still has a semi-urban cross section, roadside ditches, no curb and gutter, and as well, there's an existing water main that runs down the center of the road, which is over 50 years old. It's identified as one of our water projects. We have applied for grant funding for the water main portion of the project, and that's why this project would also be red circled and would be contingent on moving forward. In the event that we did receive the funding through the grant, then that would be something we could consider. But really, it's a road that is in need of urbanization, bringing together new pavement, new curbs, new stormwater drainage, active transportation facilities. So that's that section of road.
Councillor?
Yes, I fully agree with the director. I travel that road every day, and especially when it rains, there's about 2 or 3 large puddles on that road. So we're looking at new curbs, new sidewalks, or just curbs and sewage. And you mentioned about a water.
Director?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So this project would be a replacement of the water main, existing water main. And it would also include the urbanization and reconstruction of the road. It would most likely be all new sidewalk, new curb and gutter, new pavement, could involve new lighting. But this is something that would be done as part of this project, which is actually the design portion. It's not the construction portion. The construction portion would be would fall in that 10-year forecast in the future year. But this would be the design assignment that would start the whole process.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions from any other councillors?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, Councillor.
Through the mayor. So perhaps I'm jumping ahead, but I just can't find it. And that is with regards to the speed indicator. So pertaining to roads, and I know we got a bunch last year, and thank you, we put those up. But I still have an awful lot of complaints coming in with regards to speeding on Port Robinson and Welland Road between Haste and Pelham. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to purchase a couple more of those for those 2 locations.
To the director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So you're correct, Councillor. Last year we had a specific project that was identified in the capital budget for purchasing the speed indicator signs as well as flashing lights for Effingham Road. So we don't have a separate project this year. So it would be council's wish to have money allocated to that for that purpose. That would be an additional capital budget request. Those speed indicator signs cost about $5,000 per piece to purchase. Our town staff set up and manage the operation of those. When we do reconstructions of roads in this capital budget, I'm going to probably specifically reference Pelham Street. We could look at doing some speed indicator signs on some of the areas where we do experience speeding. But to answer your question in short, then, or not too short, but we would be looking for guidance from council to have an additional capital budget item for the purchase of those if council's wishes to have more.
I certainly would like to see specifically between Haste Street on Welland Road between Haste and Pelham. That's where an abundance of complaints come in. I know there's a 4-way stop there, but people race from as fast as they can to the four-way stop and then race again to the light. So, and that section of road has been done recently, so you won't be tackling that for many years to come, I'm sure. So I'd like to make a request for a speed indicator sign, and this is the solar ones, that the same as I'm guessing that we put up last year for that area, and then also too on Port Robinson from basically Station Street to Rice in that stretch, please.
Now,
Sorry, through you.
I'm sorry, first of all, to the clerk.
Sorry, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it sounded to me like Councillor Hahn was indicating she would like to bring a motion forward that the purchase of speed indicator signs at a budget amount of, I think, Director Marr indicated $5,000 each be added to the 2022 capital budget. And she specifically is mentioning between Hayes Street and Port Robinson Road and Port Robinson and Rice Road. Certainly, Councillor Hahn would be able to make that motion if she wished.
Council.
Yes, please.
And so therefore, if they are $5,000 each, is it your intent that it would be for $10,000 would be the increase?
Yes, please. Yeah, 5,000 times two. Those two locations specifically on, like I said, on Port Robinson between Station and Rice, and then on Welland between Pelham and Haste.
Thank you. Just give me one moment. Mr. Mayor, if council wished, they could debate this.
No. So discussion first then?
Yes.
Yes. Council, discussion on this motion put forward by Councillor Hahn. And I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director, is there any opportunity that we could, if we do $10,000 for this, that we can save $10,000 in any other portion of the capital budget?
To the director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not a large ask. So prior to making any changes to the capital budgets that we have presented, I would also like to speak to my manager of public works to see what flexibility there is as part of our operating budget, because that could be an option to fund these speed indicator signs through our operating budget. I don't have that answer with me specifically, but you can definitely take that request back to my manager of public works and report back on the 20th.
That sounds like a viable solution as opposed to approving the $10,000 right now. We can, staff can report back to us by December 20th.
Councillor Hahn, you brought that motion forward. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, either way, I'm just happy to get those two signs at the end of the day, so I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Then, Madam Clerk, we'll let that go until December 20th.
Thank you. I am making note of that. If council wishes, just have that as a note and staff to bring that back, that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to the director? Oh, I see, I don't hear you, Councillor Stewart, but I take it you have a comment. Go ahead.
I was muted again, yes. My question about the signs is, would they be ones that would be permanently located, or would they be mobile signs that, if need be, could be moved to different areas throughout the year?
To the director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the signs that we're using, the ones that we purchased last year, they're solar powered. They are portable, but they mount onto poles, and they do take about half a day to install and about half a day to remove and relocate. So you're definitely able to move them, but we would like to see them stay in one location for an extended period of time.
Thank you. I wasn't thinking about moving them every 3 days. I was thinking of, because if you have it in place for some time, people get used to having it there. And if we can maintain the speeds for a while and then monitor another area, that's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Director?
Okay. we go to the next slide here. So I promised I was going to make this presentation interesting and discuss a couple of our larger capital projects. So I'll move ahead here as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Balfour Street Bridge Replacement. So this is one of our capital projects that we're proposing to be completed this year. It's a structural steel multi-plate culvert with 2 cells. The BCI of that structure is 49, and that's the Bridge Condition Index. We are legislated to complete inspections every 2 years on all our major culverts and bridges, and we complete an overall inspection, much like the pavement investigation, and we assign a value to it based on the condition of the structure. So this one was identified as being in very poor condition, and the recommendation from our consultant was that we needed to replace the bridge as soon as possible. Next slide. This is a slide that I also featured in last year's presentation. Not in the municipality of Pelham, but located in one of our local municipalities in Niagara. And what happens is a lot of times with these culverts, these multi-plate culverts, is where the water line rests inside the culvert, you get corrosion. And then what happens then is you start to get material loss as the corrosion advances. And then you end up with a sinkhole, which will develop at the top of the road. And by that time, you're starting to do investigations and find out what's going on. And in this particular case, there was a sinkhole that had opened up that it's hard to see on the right-hand side, but you could almost fit a vehicle in there. So this is some of the risks that are associated with these structures. Sometimes you don't see these failures until it's too late. So next slide. Council approved a project in 2021, which included the replacement of the 16 road bridge. So this project would be very similar in nature. So you can see in the top left, that was the existing bridge culverts, the way they stood. And then I've got below left, I've got a copy or a picture of the construction taking place. We used high density polyethylene type material instead of steel, which will prevent corrosion. And they're fused together and welded together on site, which provides a really stable and secure structure. 2 pictures on the right just kind of show what the finished product was, and the budget on this was $650,000, and we were able to come in under budget on this project. Next slide. In 2019, we completed a pavement investigation study, a condition study on all our roads within our network. Right now, the overall PCI rating of our network is 69. And if you recall, Public Works brought a report forward to council, which suggested that in order to maintain that PCI over the next 10 years, we need to invest at least $3.2 million in our road rehabilitation and resurfacing projects. So it's very important to have a fairly robust resurfacing program and maintenance program. And this year, they're slightly increased, I think, from last year's budget, but very modest increases. And as you work yourself through the 10-year forecast, you'll see that the value of these 2 projects are increasing. So $150,000 for our road base and surface repair program, which is really an asphalt patching program, and then our 2022 road rehab program, which is more of a full resurfacing program, takes on larger projects. Next slide. The next project I'd like to talk about is the design portion for a larger project, which will see the reconstruction of Quaker Road between Pelham Street and Line Avenue. This is a fairly heavily traveled section of road. The PCI on it in 2019 was 60, I believe, 60 something. So not necessarily in dire need of reconstruction, but what the issue is with Quaker Road and this particular section is it's used heavily by vehicles as well as pedestrians. There's no active transportation facilities on the road, and it is a very unsafe segment of road. we were approached by the Niagara region. The Niagara region is completing a sanitary sewer trunk installation project, and it's going to run from tied into a manhole on Pelham Street and runs to the east all the way through to Rice Road. The project is going to be completed by the region. They're in the detailed design assignment right now. They retained a consultant to undertake that work, and they're expecting to go to construction on this in 2023. So the region approached the town with respect to opportunities for a partnership. So what the capital ask is this year is to enter into an agreement with the region to piggyback on their consultant to do the design work, which would see the installation of a new water main between Pelham Street and Line Avenue. And the water main is in need of repair. We've experienced several breaks over the last few years on this section of water main. As well, it would see the complete reconstruction and urbanization of the roadway, new curbs and gutters, new storm sewer, the roadside ditches would be gone, new sidewalk, active transportation facilities, and most likely some new lighting for the roadway. So this portion is only the design. If you look into the capital forecast, you'll see a project that's slated in there, penciled in for 2023 right now for construction. The total value of the project that would be the town would be responsible for would be about 1.8 million. And that would be for basically the new water main, new storm sewer systems, and the infrastructure to basically reconstruct the road. We have received a proposal from the region's design consultant. They've gone through the process of their RFP and their procurement process, their competitive process to retain that firm. And I can say that we have received a proposal from them, which is very competitive for a detailed design assignment. On December 6th, Council will be presented with a report from staff, which kind of lays this project out in more detail and requests Council's approval to move ahead with awarding the detailed design portion for Pelham's work to the region's consultant to carry out the detailed design in 2022. And then we would obviously look for an agreement, a cost sharing agreement with the region of Niagara to undertake the construction work. The region would be the project manager and administrator, and the town of Pelham would be a cost sharing partner in the project. So that's, if anybody's got any questions on this particular project, I know there's a lot of information I just threw at you, but there is a report that will be coming to council on December 6th, which is in advance of the December 20th council's consideration for the capital budget. So that'll give you some more detailed information on this particular project, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has at this time.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. The 16 road structure, the 16 road bridge structure, that you said the budget was 650,000. We came in underneath that. Is there any idea? Do you have any idea how much it was underneath that? And the purpose of my question is the question about the Balfour Street. If we're budgeting 650, do you see any opportunity of doing the same kind of design and coming up with a reduced cost for that one? The second part of my question is we put in some infrastructure there, including trees and things, I believe, from looking at it. Is that complete now as far as the project's concerned?
To the director.
So yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the project is complete. It's in the warranty phase right now. So obviously there's a 1-year warranty period. And then staff will, with the consultant, will review the project in a year from now. And then any deficiencies would be completed by the contractor at that time. The design for Balfour Street Bridge is already complete. So that was a design assignment that was completed for 2 structures. And in 2021, we completed the reconstruction of 16 Road, and then looking forward to 2022, looking to reconstruct Balfour Street. So the design is complete. It is almost identical to what we did on 16 Road with the same type of materials. With respect to budget, I don't have those numbers directly in front of me, but I do believe with respect to construction costs, contract administration and inspection costs, we were somewhere around 600,000. So there would be some cost savings that we could realize, but until we actually tender that project out, there's not substantial savings there. That's kind of a realistic estimate for the replacement of the structure.
Okay, thank you. And the second question I have is the Quaker Road, the cross section. Would that be, you said sidewalks, is there parking included in that, or do you have a cross section yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, this assignment will be the detailed design assignment. So that we'll work with a consultant to come up with what the town's request is for the proposed cross section. At this time, there's nothing set in stone, and there's really hardly been any discussion on it. That'll be all part of the detailed design process. But my thinking on it is that at least one side of the road would have pedestrian sidewalks, most likely some on-road cycling facilities, most probably not any on-street parking on that section of road.
And finally, Mr. Mayor, the way you're speaking about this, it sounds like you favor this as a method of cooperating with somebody else and coming up with the project. They do who's responsible for the environmental assessment? Would that be the region as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in this particular instance, they would be responsible for any environmental assessment process with respect to the sanitary sewer work. With this project, it would be classified as a Schedule A+ through the Municipal Environmental Assessment Act, which basically means that it's a pre-approved project. The reconstruction of the road is very similar to Pelham Street, is being used. It's being done with the vision of it being used for the same purpose and function. There's no increase in capacity of traffic and lanes. So it would be a pre-approved project from the environmental assessment stage aspect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have one question for the director. Going back to the culverts, either on 16 or on Maple Street, the new and improved culverts, as it were. The original strictly galvanized culverts, apparently installed in 1970 and going to be replaced in 22. That's approximately a 50-year lifespan. Any idea on what the new culverts will be? The lifespan is expected on those with the poly on them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we designed to a 75-year lifespan. And with respect to the actual performance of this type of material, again, I'd rely on the advice and a response from our consultant on that, but we designed to 75 years.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions from any councillor? I see Councillor Kaur.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. By accepting the design Quaker Road, we'll be saving about $100,000, because my earlier question was on our RD 12-22. It's costing us $150 for about the same or even least amount of roadway. Am I right?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So you're stealing all my thunder for my report on December 6th. But yes, so usually detailed design assignments will range anywhere from 5 to 10% of the value of the construction project. So we're estimating the value of this project to be about $2 million. So originally I had this, the detailed design assignment for Quaker Road in our forecast slated somewhere around $125,000 to complete the works. We're able to leverage the work that's already been completed by the region with this particular consultant. They've done all their topographic surveys, all their sub-utility investigations, and they basically can really provide the town with an excellent value for money for doing the rest of the design, because they've done a lot of the legwork already.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry I took your thunder away, but we'll probably save the taxpayer 100 to 150,000 then, right?
I believe, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there will be substantial savings to the taxpayer for partnering with the region on this project.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Not seeing any. To the director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So another project, we already touched on this. This was a project that would see the, again, a design assignment for Canberra Road from Haste to Highway 20. And again, it's in combination with the water main replacement project, which we've applied to the Green Grant to fund. So this project would be red circled and would only advance if we were able to get the funding. Otherwise, again, section of road that needs to be addressed, it would be pushed into another year for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
If anybody has any questions on this, can answer now.
Councillor Cord, did I see you wave a hand?
No, sir.
No. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So our largest project, which has a lot of attention right now, is the Pelham Street project, reconstruction project. The project limits extended from College Street south to the Pelham Welland town boundary. The total overall project length, which is highlighted in orange, is about 2.5 kilometers. And with increases in construction costs and consulting and materials, we're estimating the total project to cost for all phases to be somewhere around $12 million. We did receive funding for this project, combined grant from the federal and provincial governments for a total of $4.2 million, and that's being allocated to phase 2, which is currently in construction, phase 3, and then the final phase, phase 4. Next slide. So this phase 3 project is basically it's almost just under a kilometer in length. It will extend from the south limit of phase 2, which is just south of Pancake Lane and Pelham Road intersection, and will extend approximately 950 meters to just past the second or the most southerly Spruce Side Street entrance. Again, very similar to what is being completed as part of the phase 2 project. It'll include new stormwater management, new water main. It'll include a reconstruction of the road platform, which will include active transportation facilities such as on-road bike lanes, new pedestrian sidewalks, and we estimate that the cost of this project is $4.2 million, $3.6 million of which is dedicated to the roads reserve, and then $600,000 of it is directly related to water and wastewater, which is in the part of our water budget. Next phase or next slide. So if anybody has any questions with respect to Pelham Street, I can answer those at this time.
Actually, I do, if I could, Jason.
Yeah.
Mr. Moore. So that project, if I'm correct, that total project was originally budgeted for $8.4 million, and now we're at the forecast is $12 million. So that's forgive the language, but that's a hell of an increase. Are we doing any more work, or am I wrong? correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was 8.4 million, and then you just mentioned it's going to be 12 million. Where did the extra 4 million come from, if I may ask?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So overall, the general scope of work has changed, but not significantly. We're still looking at the same length of road. We're not increasing any number of lanes. So overall, the scope of work has kind of remained fairly consistent with what was originally planned. The original design was completed for this project in 2013. And when we submitted the grant application, which was maxed out at 4.2 million, that's the maximum amount of the grant that you could receive. When we estimated the cost of the project using the 2013 estimates and allowing for inflation, we estimated that project was, I believe you're right, somewhere in the order of $9 million. And as it stands right now, with cost increases based on materials and contracting increases, consultant costs have increased. So we're actually estimating now the cost to be somewhere just below 12 million. So it is an increase in cost for sure.
Okay, thank you for that. I know with the through the instruction of the CAO, I did go back to our provincial MPP, Mr. Osterhoff, to see if he could be a little more generous. But he said nope. The 4.2 million grant would be held at the 4.2 million. So I guess it's the old it is what it is saying, I guess. Thank you for that.
Okay, if there's no further questions on Pelham Street, we'll move on to Effingham.
Mayor.
Sorry.
Oh wait,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Marr. The Pelham Street was supposed to be done in 4 stages, and it appears that the 4th stage will be delayed a year. Am I correct on that? So we can finish Quaker Road?
Through Mr. Mayor. So yes, exactly. Right now, we are hoping, right now we're in the design process for phase 3 and 4. If council recalls, staff brought forward a report, asked for approval to award the design assignment for phase 3 and 4, and the consultant has started that work. So we're hopeful that we can get a tender out early next year. Because we're a little late on getting to the design phase, that may be pushed into the later quarters of 2022. So I'm hoping that I'm optimistic that we would get a design or get a tender out for this work to proceed in the summer of 2022, but that very well could extend into 2023. The works to actually complete the project, and the region did indicate that they were looking at coming through with their sanitary trunk sewer extending from Pelham Street all the way to Rice as part of a project that would be completed in 2023. So the idea, we would partner with the region and construct Quaker Road from the intersection east to Line Avenue, and then the following year, as part of the 2024 capital ask, we would complete Pelham Street, which would include that portion of Pelham Street from Spruce Side all the way south to the Welland Pelham town boundary, and would also include the full reconstruction of that Pelham and Quaker Welland Road intersection.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. To the director.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Effingham Street. This is a section of road that is in need of repair. It extends from Highway 20 north to Tice Road, and as you can see by some of the pictures, it has experienced some failure, specifically along the edges of roadway, and there are drainage issues on this section of road. It's an ex-regional road, so it is heavily traveled. we're in the process now of doing the detailed design work for this project. And as of right now, we're expecting the design to be completed in the winter and with a spring tender. Now, the interesting part about this section of roadway, it is in need of repair. It's got a PCI 51, but it also is one of the segments on the race route for the Canada Summer Games, which are scheduled to take place in August of 2022. So this is a project that we hope to have the design completed again early Q1 of 2022, get a tender out and have this work completed by July of 2022. Is there any questions with respect to this project?
Any questions from council? Not
Yes,
hearing it.
through you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Council Wing.
Yeah, to Mr. Marr. You mentioned that this is part of the cycling route. Is Sailors Hill part of the cycling route also?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's not actually. They travel north on Effingham from Cambro Road through the Highway 20 intersection to Tice, and then they head west on Tice. So, okay. And yes, that and as part of the 2023 or 2024 budget ask, we'll be looking to get reconstruction money for Sailors Hill.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Any other questions? Not hearing any. To the director.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that takes care of the roads budget with respect to fleet. Again, we have a fairly substantial fleet that's managed by one mechanic. So the 2022 ask, I think, is fairly modest. And go to the next slide. Again, this is something I don't have any specific presentations on any particular item, but if there's any questions that council has with respect to this proposed budget, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions on the items that you see on the sheet ahead of us? Not hearing any. Director Marr?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was on mute.
Go ahead.
Just one quick question through you to Mr. Marr. The VEH 07-22 baseball grooming tractor replaces two existing Kubota tractors. How will those tractors be deployed, or will they be sold off?
To the director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a good question. I don't have an answer to that at the moment. I can ask our manager of public works to see what would be done with those two other tractors, or maybe.
Yeah, sorry. I can answer the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Normally, the vehicles are put on the GovDev site. That's our public auction site, and that's where we normally sell our vehicles.
Councillor?
Okay. So they will be sold then. So any guesstimate on how much we would get for those?
No.
Probably not, Councillor.
Okay. Maybe it'd be $10,000 for two speed sign.
We'll hope for it. I see Councillor Hildebrand.
For you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. With regards to the electric vehicle for the building department, are you included, is the charging station included in the price of that vehicle? Or are you planning on charging it at the MCC that has a facility to electric charge those vehicles?
To the director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So no, this does not include the charging station. So there are some options that are available with respect to charging this particular vehicle. It will run on a regular 110 with an extension cord and charge sufficiently over the course of a night for use the following day. If you're looking for increased speed with respect to charging and installation of an actual charging station, that would have to be completed under a separate project.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our cemetery capital budget, again, it's a fairly small ask. Can you go to the next slide? In this budget, we are looking for a shoring system that staff would be able to use when excavating and requiring deeper digs in the cemetery. We have very sandy, shifty soil. So this would be a shoring system that would act as a safety measure for the staff. Into the wastewater budgets. Our wastewater plan was completed throughout the town. I show this slide on every budget presentation because it does identify deficiencies that were identified as part of that 2017 study. It's very hard to see, but if you look in the bottom right corner, or left corner, sorry, you'll see orange and yellow. They indicate a lack of capacity and poor condition on those sanitary sewers. So those are some of the projects that we're going to be focusing on in the next couple of years to try to upgrade the capacity of those sewers. Next slide, please. Again, like I said, in 2017, we completed a investigation and study of all of our sanitary sewers, developed a model which we're able to use to model capacities and flows in the system. As part of those ongoing, I guess, investigations, we do annual CCTV camera inspections of our infrastructure. That's a line item that's in our capital budget, and it's an annual program that we do every year. We try to get to at least a third of our network every year, so that every 3 years we're getting a new visual and inspection report on our sanitary sewer systems. And really, this is pretty integral as well into our capital asset management program to make sure we can keep up to what the current condition is of those systems that are underground. So we also, one of the biggest things that, the region is focusing on is sanitary I&I reduction programs. So I&I reduction programs are inflow and infiltration. So with a water main, it's a pressurized system, and you can identify very, very easily when there's a failure in that system. With a sanitary sewer system, it's usually all gravity fed. And what happens over time, you start to get material that corrodes and starts to break down, and you start to get unwanted water that enters the system. So now your sanitary system is collecting waste, but it's also collecting unwanted water from storm events that put additional pressures on not only our own collection system, but also on the region's system with respect to their pumping stations and their treatment plants. So there's a lot of focus on trying to make your sanitary system as Loctite as possible. Some of the things that you can do are manhole, concrete isolation manholes that you place around the lids of manholes to try to prevent premature failure of those manholes and reduce the amount of water that's infiltrating. And as well as some, we haven't done them yet here, but sanitary pipe relining projects. Those also are something that we would look at doing in the future. But it all comes from the inspections and looking at what your condition is and then inputting that information into our asset management plan so that we can make informed decisions on rehabilitation projects. Next slide. You probably see us doing this on our major roads now. if you look at the top right, you'll see that's a concrete isolation manhole. And really what happens in roadways is you start to get failures with respect to your manholes and at the road surface. The road surface is carrying water, and then you get unwanted water in those systems. So these concrete isolation manholes help to stabilize and reinforce those manholes and limit the amount of infiltration. Again, I briefly mentioned on pipe relining projects. We've done small sections of sanitary sewer pipe relinings, especially with laterals. So it's a good opportunity to strengthen and reinforce a condition of a pipe without actually having to dig down and remove and excavate the pipe and replace it. So these pipe relining projects are in situ and don't require excavations and basically disturbance of your roadway surface to complete the work. Next slide. Our biggest project that we're going to be undertaking as part of the 2022 capital budget is the Church Street sanitary sewer capacity upgrade. If you recall, staff brought a report forward which outlined the Church Street and the Foss Street sanitary sewer replacement projects and some of the challenges that staff were, as well as our consultants, were seeing with respect to the soil conditions, the high water tables, and the having to cross the CP rail. So this is a project that would basically see a new sanitary sewer from Canberra Road south to almost Foss. It's increased the capacity. The existing pipe is a 250 millimeter sanitary sewer, and we would be installing a new 375 millimeter sewer. The total project cost is estimated to be about $2.5 million. And because of the restrictions on working around the CP rail tracks, we have to use some type of trenchless method to install that sanitary sewer. So you can see on the bottom right, I talked about it in my report that came to council previously, but this is a jack and bore method of installation. So basically you're pushing a casing, jacking it underneath the tracks underground, and then using an auger system to excavate the material, and then you just keep it advancing the casing. And then you would install your sanitary sewer pipe once you had your connection from the installation pits. So that project, the sanitary sewer replacement on Church Street and Foss, if you recall in the previous few slides, that 2017 model and investigation showed that there was deficiencies there, capacity issues, and with the developments that are coming on in Fenwick, these projects are critical to be completed, or otherwise the town could be looking at issues with respect to sanitary sewer capacity issues, flooding, basement flooding, that type of thing. So I don't know if anybody has any questions with respect to this project. I know Foss Road is another section of this. Church Street is just further in the design process than Foss Road is at this point in time. So staff have elected to propose the Church Street sanitary sewer upgrade first. So that's why this project's being advanced in 2022.
Okay, thank you, Director Marr. Any questions on this part of the presentation?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wink.
Thank you. To Mr. Marr, earlier this year you brought a report to council to state that the project was going to be considerably higher than what we had originally anticipated. How confident are you with the $2.5 million sewer upgrade for the Church Street? How confident are you with that estimated cost?
To the director.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I'm very confident. Right now we're at about 95% done the detailed design phase. So that's where a lot of variability comes into play. and a lot of educated guesswork comes into play when you, at the start of a project, you should be allowing for almost 40% contingency with respect to the value of the project before you get into the detailed design. And as you work yourself through the design phases, your estimate should be refined and you become a lot more precise with what the value of that project would be. So based on the fact that we're at 95%, 90% complete the detailed design now, I'm fairly confident that that $2.5 million value is a good number.
So no more surprises.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's always the opportunity for surprises once you get into the underground and with the soil conditions are here. But these things have been factored in. We've done geotechnical investigations. So yes, I am confident that the $2.5 million estimate is a sound, solid number for this project.
Thank you, Director.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Do we now have the approval of CP Rail for this project? I think that we were waiting for that at some point there.
To the Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do not have approvals yet. I know that CP Rail is working closely with our consultant as well as town engineering staff to get those approvals in place. And as part of this whole process, CP Rail has been a stakeholder in the discussion, so they are aware. I think it's a matter of just getting things finalized and getting the permits through. So they have been involved in the process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. To the Director, I just hope that the consultants are taking into consideration the soil type, meaning quicksand located in that particular part of the town. I'm sure they will. Any other questions? Not. Oh, I see Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to jump around a bit. Back to page 50 on the capital object summary. It shows number 301068, the MCC additional parking for 2023 at $775,000. I do have a motion coming forward to address at least a temporary solution to the parking. And my concern is twofold. If we can at least get the parking expanded in 2022, on a temporary basis, we won't at that point have to worry about the next council, whoever they may be, red circling the permanent expansion and deferring this initiative. And my other concern is that if we don't get this addressed to put aside the money for a temporary solution in this budget, and that comes about after the budget is passed, we'll end up hearing that same old refrain. Do we have any money in the budget for that? I do have a motion coming forward in next meeting, so be prepared.
Any comments at this point, Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I just quickly looked at my budget binder. I do see that we have a placeholder in the 2023 forecast for additional parking at the MCC. So this will follow, I believe, on the heels of the parking study that's being completed currently. As well, and the Director of Corporate Services may correct me, but I believe there's an additional item that Council may consider with respect to advancing an engineering portion to see what options are available.
To the Treasurer, any comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works, are you referring to that in the capital budget, Jason?
Yes.
If I can, may I speak?
Yes.
Through the Mayor, in the operating budget section of the binder, there are discretionary items for council consideration. And number one is engineering design for the MCC parking lot for $75,000. Is that the project you're referring to?
Yeah, I believe it is. It's on page 7 of the operating budget. I believe that is the study for the temporary parking.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct. Thank you.
So I believe that's what the Director of Public Works is referring to.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I do recall seeing that there was a discretionary item for 75,000 for doing some design work there. So exactly, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart, any comments?
Yeah, I did see that on page 7, but an engineering study for building a parking lot is different than putting money aside to get a temporary solution in place. I was at the community center this weekend and the previous weekend, and the parking is sorely lacking. We need to get something done, and if this gets deferred, and if it does go through to add the parking for 2023, it may not get finished until late in the year 2023, which would make it 2 more years from now, and that would be dependent on what the next council decides. So I'm looking and pushing to get at least a temporary solution put in place as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. As you have pointed out, you will be bringing forth a motion at the December 6th meeting. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions to the director? Not seeing any. Director Marr?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the screenshot of the wastewater capital budget request. I've gone through a number of these projects. So unless there's any other questions here, we can move on.
Any question from any councillors on these screenshots that you're now looking at? I don't hear anyone. Director Marr?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So onto the water distribution system. Pelham operates approximately 85 kilometers of water main. We're legislated under the Safe Water Drinking Act to deliver and transport clean drinking water to the residents of the town of Pelham. We are a level 2 system, so we actually receive clean drinking water from the region, and our job is to make sure that we transport that water with the same quality. So there are projects that are identified as part of our water distribution system and our drinking water quality management system that we use. And we go to the next slide. Here's a screenshot of our 2022 capital budget. Water 0122 is that $600,000 water main replacement that I discussed as part of the Pelham Street Reconstruction project. So this would be a new water main from basically John Street down to the south Spruce Side entrance. An annual capital program that we have is a water system repair equipment, and this is just to purchase certain water equipment that's used to maintain our system. Again, the design of Cambro Road, the water portion of it, $100,000. The water main is over 50 years old in this section of road. We've experienced failures, and it's in need of replacement. It has been identified for replacement as part of the drinking water quality management system. Another design project that is red circled and would, I guess, hinge on us receiving approval through the Green Grant is the design for the eventual replacement of the water main in Daleview, Strathcona, Mute Drive, and Pinecrest area. Again, this is all cast iron water main that's over 50 years old and is in need of replacement. So the only major reconstruction project, water main replacement project, is the work being done at Pelham Street, but there are some design work that we need to do in advance of construction, and that's what these other items are.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Director Marr. Any questions on what we see ahead of us? Not seeing, not hearing anyone, Mr. Director?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I think I just wanted to have a real interesting slide to end my presentation. So this shows a major water main break. We don't get this in Pelham. Usually you would have water bubbling up through the road, and it would be identified, and then our staff would get out to fix it. But there are two, this just basically details the two design assignments that we'd be looking at doing as part of the water main replacement program. Again, Canberra Road and the water mains on North Fawn Hill. Cast iron water mains, they tend to break down and corrode over years. So they are replaced with new PVC pipe, which doesn't corrode. And yeah, just a quick snapshot of what those two design projects would entail.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Director Marr. Any questions, comments? Not seeing or hearing any to the director.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to now turn this over to Director of Corporate Services.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next capital project that we have is Community Planning and Development. And this is the project that we have. And if there are any questions, the Director of Community Planning and Development is available to answer any questions.
Any questions? Not hearing any. To the director.
The next one is the library services. There are two projects here. One is the annual replacement of this is a replacement of their computer for $10,000. The second one is red circled. The library is looking at some potential grants to replace the shelving units that they have. Right now, there are issues with the height of those shelving, and they are quite old, over 30 years old. And they also are looking at using some of their reserves for the shelves. So right now, it's just red circled.
Okay, thank you. So if I may have a question to the director, have they actually had an RFP that came back and quoted this price for the shelving, or is this an estimate on someone's part?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a quote. Just my understanding is that the library has gone out and just received some quotes on what the shelving would cost. So it's just an estimate. They have not gone out for RFP because they don't have the funds right now.
Yep. Okay. Great. But they have had someone come in and take a look and give them this estimate. Okay. Great. Thank you.
It's for 218 shelving units. So it's all the shelves in the Fawn Hill branch.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for that.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, Councilor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. What is the state of accessibility of the Font Hill branch? Does this make it totally accessible, having the shelving units changed? Or are there other things that have to be done to that building?
To the director?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, there are other issues related to the facility itself. I know that they have requested an elevator in order for them to expand down to the lower level. So, and also the washrooms have to be renovated as well for accessibility. As council recalls, right now we still have a grant that we applied for the new library to be added to the Meridian Community Center. So if that gets approved, then we would not do the renovations to the existing library. So we're still waiting to hear back from the ministry on the funding for the new library at the MCC. But all these accessibility issues have to be addressed by 2025. So we still have a few years.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the library? Not seen any. To the director.
Municipal drainage, there are no projects planned for 2022. And so the next section's on debentures and debt, and I'm going to hand this over to Charlotte Tunikaitis, our Manager of Financial Services and Deputy Treasurer.
Thank you. Charlotte, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So our debentures that are existing are projected to be at a balance of $31 million at the end of 2021. And because the capital forecast isn't adding any debt in 2022 and will be making principal repayments, the forecast debentures at the end of 2022 is $28.7 million. We have multiple sources of funding for debt. So there's operating debt, which is funded by the tax levy. And then there's non-operating debt, which is funded by items like development charges, parkland dedication, or the MCC donation pledges. The interest and principal payments that are non-operating are not included in the tax levy budget. They come out of those reserve funds or out of those other sources of revenue. This schedule shows a summary of the debt that's outstanding, what it relates to, whether it's operating or funded by development charges, and what the payments will be for the year. And it shows you what the ending balance is. This graph shows if we carry out the current capital forecast that is planned, and we've made assumptions based on the increase in own source revenues, this is what our debt will be as a percentage of our own source revenue. So this is the percentage that most people refer to as annual repayment limit. The annual repayment limit is a 25% limit set by the province. And then the limit is actually the difference between the 25% and what we're currently at. So I usually use the term own source debt as a percent of own source revenues. And what own source means is it excludes items like grants, unpredictable sources of revenue. It excludes development charges. So that's something important to keep in mind as well, that when you looked at the debenture schedule and you see almost half of our debt is funded through development charges, that revenue is not taken into account when our annual repayment limit is calculated, because it's outside of the control of the municipality and it can be somewhat unpredictable. So you can see from this graph, I was just going to point out that we are within the internal debt limit that is in our debt policy in this projection, and that red line that you're seeing is the limit, and we'll exceed it just slightly in 2030 if we carry out the plan as it exists right now. The next slide shows some of our debt-related financial indicators, and the debt policy that was approved by Council requires us to calculate these indicators and provide them in comparison to other local area municipalities. So some of the items that I want to highlight here are the fact that we are in the high risk category for debt as a percent of own source revenues. We're at 13%, where the limit is 25. And as you can see, looking at the other municipalities, it is not common for anyone to go to 25%. It is not a common thing. So 13% is high in comparison. I'll also highlight we are in the moderate risk for net financial assets or net debt as a percentage of own source revenues. And that's because we are in a net debt position. So when you see positive numbers in that column, it means their financial assets exceed their financial liabilities, whereas for Pelham, our financial liabilities exceed our financial assets. And what that means is that we will require future tax revenues in order to pay for the debt that's been taken out. So if we go to the next slide, this year we provided a comparison for multiple years to show what has happened to Pelham's financial indicators over the last few years. So you can see that Our debt as a percentage of own source revenues has stayed fairly consistent. But you can see an improvement in the debt service coverage ratio, but especially the debt to reserve ratio. So the third column shows that our debt to reserve ratio used to be 16, and in 2020 it was 3.31. And so what that means is our debt was 16 times higher than our reserves in 2017, and it's now 3.3 times higher than our reserves. So that ratio has improved significantly. The debt per capita hasn't changed much because the population information is based on Statistics Canada, and it won't be updated until the next census information is updated. And then I'll also just move over and show you how the total reserves and reserve funds as a percent of operating expenditures has also improved steadily over the last few years. So you can see from 9%, then into moderate, and now at 42%. So a lot of that's a result of the surpluses that were transferred into the reserves, the non-COVID related savings and excess revenues that were transferred in, and all of those transfers to reserves are the main reason for the improvement in these ratios. Lastly, I wanted to point out that the asset consumption ratio is in the low risk category, but this is actually not representative of all of our assets. So that is primarily because the MCC is a large, expensive asset and it's new. And that when you calculate it for all of our assets as a whole, it makes it look like they're not very old. But for example, our fleet is at about 77%, meaning that it's aging, it's in need of repairs. So I would just caution you that we always have to look at these ratios in light of all the information that we have. So I think basically this slide is just summarizing what I've discussed. Pelham does have the highest debt per capita of the lower tier Niagara municipalities. And generally the capital plan isn't expected to improve them very much because our reserves are not really increasing at a very fast rate. But a number of our indicators have been improving from 2017 to 2020 due to increased transfers to reserves and restraint in taking out new debt. Moving on to our reserves and reserve funds, this diagram shows that in the operating budget, we have a number of expenditures, salaries and wages, materials and supplies, and one of those items is the transfers to reserve. And so when we transfer funds from the budget, the operating budget, into the reserves, then we can pull from those as part of the capital budget. We also have reserve funds, like the development charge reserve fund, that also funds capital. So reserves are established at the discretion of council, and they're often part of a financial strategy for capital projects or programs. They're an allocation of the accumulated surplus of the town, and they are not associated with any specific asset. They can be discretionary or non-discretionary. Drawdowns from non-discretionary reserves must be for expenditures related to their revenue source. So an example is the water and wastewater reserves. Reserve funds are similar, but those are monies set aside by a bylaw of the municipality, an external agreement, or provincial legislation. So they can be obligatory when they're from provincial legislation. In that case, the interest earned on the funds must be allocated to that specific fund, and it has segregated assets. It actually has to be segregated in a separate bank account. And so the town of Pelham has several obligatory reserve funds: development charges, parkland dedication, Canada Community Building Fund, provincial gas tax, OSIF, and other external grants. As part of our capital budget, the town has prepared a 10-year reserve forecast summary to illustrate the long-range financial plan of the town. And the following table that I'm going to show you looks at those projections as they're laid out in the current capital plan, and it assumes that we will increase reserve transfers from anywhere from $320,000 to $620,000 per year. If those approved transfers differ, or we have extra projects, or we change the timing of those projects, all of these estimates could change. So as the Director of Public Works said earlier, there's always room for some surprises. This forecast is assuming that some projects will be debentured beginning in 2023, with debt taken out in the following year in accordance with the 10-year forecast. So I'm going to focus on these 5 years, even though I have all 10 in the slide. A couple of things that I'd like to draw your attention to. One is when you look at the 2020 balance, it's just over $10 million. The reason that is so different from the balance at the end of 2021 is the 2020 balance agrees to our audited financial statements, whereas all of the projected balances include commitments. So at the end of 2020, we had over $5 million of capital projects carrying forward, and that's what makes the balance higher at the end of the year than what we keep saying in our projection. But because we want to have in mind what funds are actually available for us to spend, when we present it in the capital budget, we include all the commitments against those reserves. The other thing to note is when you look at 2021 versus 2022, you can see that we're actually drawing down a little bit on our reserves in order to carry out all of those projects that we talked about. So because we have such an increase in expenditure and we have started to invest and build up our reserve funds, we're using some of that for the capital plan in 2022. And so if you go to the next slide, you can just see that if we continue with this plan and we increase the reserve transfers over time, they are going to start to trend up, but it does take time. We have also prepared a 10-year reserve fund projection, and this projects for the Development Charge Reserve Fund and the Parkland Dedication Reserve Fund. It's also assumed that some projects will be debentured in order to maintain a positive balance. And we've made assumptions about interest rates, capital costs, and timing of projects. In addition, the projected collections for the Development Charge Reserve Fund are based on the estimates of anticipated amount, type, and location of residential development, and I should also say non-residential development, within the town between 2019 and 2029 that are found in the DC background study. We've made the assumption that collections for indoor recreation will increase in time as the service level standard is updated, and the timing of development charge collections is in many respects outside of the control of the town and may differ from the projection. So this is just to help us in planning, but it's our best estimate at this time. And so if you look here, you can see, for example, we're estimating at the end of 2021, we might wind up having collected about $3 million in development charges. Next year, we're hoping it'll be around 3.5 million. And you can see that the debenture principal and interest next year is going to be 1.4 million. And then we have an additional 2.6 million in capital projects to be carrying out. So we're projecting to spend more from the development charge reserve than we are projecting to collect. And so you can see as it just goes along, it will fluctuate with time, and it is based on all of those estimates that we talked about. Just gonna keep going there. The Parkland Dedication Reserve Fund has also been projected, and we looked at the 5-year average of collections. It's approximately 385,000. However, there has been significant growth in recent years, so we adjusted the projection down as we expect the rate of development to slow. So if you look at this projection, you can see that the Parkland Dedication Reserve Fund is forecast to be drawn down over the next few years and then be close to zero. It actually can't go into a negative the way it looks in 2025. We would just have to shave $8,000 or so off of the capital projects for that year. The Canada Community Building Reserve Fund, it used to be formally called the Federal Gas Tax Fund, and the town has an agreement with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for that grant. And we've made the assumption in the budget that basically we're going to spend everything we receive every year, apart from 2021, when we did receive some top-up funds, and we're carrying that forward to 2022 in order to help fund those projects. The Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund is another grant. It's provincial funding, and we've also assumed that all of the funds will be spent within the year received. I should note that we don't know how much we'll receive for 2022 yet, but we're still waiting for that announcement. Okay, and so I'm gonna just ask that we move to the next slide while I discuss the reserve target. So the reserve and reserve fund policy approved by council includes targets for the reserves, minimum and maximum target, and then a range of contributions that we'd like to see. So you can see here that a number of the reserves, the straight line that's going through is the actual reserve balances as they're targeted at the end of 2021, and it is below the target for a large number of the reserves, specifically roads. So way up there near the $6 million range is what we would like to have in the roads reserve in order to be able to avoid debt and actually be able to carry out our projects without taking on more debt, but we're not there yet. We will update these targets in 2022 when the asset management plan is complete. And I do want to mention again that these balances that you see in the straight line include the commitments, where the ones that you see in the financial statements do not include commitments. So that's some of the reason for the difference there. So in the budget binder, there are a number of reserve projections. I'm just going to walk through this first one and then move through the next ones and just leave it with council if you have any questions for me. So what this forecast shows is that at 2021, we're forecasting a balance in the IT reserve of just under $10,000. The target minimum balance is $135,000 and the target balance is $269,000. Over to the right, the phased in target minimum balance, that original means that this reserve was actually in a deficit position when we set the phased in targets. So what we were trying to do was get it slowly to a positive balance over the next several years. Fortunately, because of all the additional transfers that we've done in the last couple of years, it's now in a positive balance. So we've revised that phased in target to 0 because we've said we don't really want to go back into a negative balance. We want to keep them positive as much as possible. And so what you can see there is, we're contributing, $132,000 in 2022, $212,000 in 2023, and then in the capital spending line, the negative numbers, you can see the spending coming out, and then at the bottom in the green, it shows what the balance is forecast to be at the end of each of those years. So it's increasing over time, but slowly. So I'm not going to go through each of the reserves, but I will just pause there if there are any questions on the reserve forecasts.
Okay. Any questions, comments from any member of council on the reserves and the reserves forecast? Not seeing any, Charlotte?
Okay, so I did want to talk a little bit about the wastewater and water reserves. So you can see here that even with the significant increases we've had in water and wastewater rates in recent years, we're still forecast to be in a deficit at the end of 2023. So that shows why those increases have been so necessary. When you see that we have $2.4 million forecast for expenditure in 2023, and we're transferring in $973,000 that year, you can see why these contributions to the reserves are so critical. And so that is the main reason that there has been a focus on those increased rates in the last few years. And moving on to the water, this one looks like it's in a much better position. But if you do look at the 10-year, you can see it's also moving into a deficit position in the 10-year range. So I think that's part of the challenge of reserve planning and reserve forecasting is a lot of times we're sort of saving up for very expensive assets down the road. And so sometimes it looks like right now, everything's good. Maybe, we don't need to add as much, but we need to look at that full 5-10-year horizon and make sure that we're not going to be in a tough spot a few years down the road. So those are the reasons for those increases. So as part of this capital budget, we prepared a summary to show what the impact is of the increased reserve transfers that we need on the tax levy. For 2022, the tax levy impact is $560,000 or 3.6% tax levy increase. This includes the increased reserve transfers, and we moved approximately $155,000 worth of capital budget items into the operating budget because they were more routine in nature and they didn't meet capitalization criteria under public sector accounting standards. So we do require increased reserve transfers in the future in order to carry out our planned capital projects and minimize our debt levels. Newly issued debt in future years will impact the tax levy when the payments commence. So even when we take out debt, the year following the debt issuance, you add the principal and interest payments onto your tax levy budget. So ultimately, you still see the impact of that capital item on the tax levy. It's just a matter of whether it gets spread out over the life of the debt, or whether you save up and put it into reserves earlier. And the capital forecast has been balanced, so the impact of the increased reserve transfers and debt are fairly evenly distributed. So if we look at the last slide that I have, this is the summary of what the impact is. So if we go down towards the bottom, just to focus on what the bottom line is, the second time you see the letter A, that line is the increase that's required in tax levy supported capital reserve transfers. So we need a $405,000 increase this year, $626,000 next year, and so on. The next line is that $155,000 is the amount that I showed, that I explained was capital items shifted into the operating budget. And then the last line with the B is the increase in debt payments that are in the forecast. So if we carry out the forecast and we take out the debt we said we would need to take out, this is how the debt payments are going to increase over the next 5 years. And so this shows that with all of those items, as we evenly spread them out, it would be a 3 to 4% tax levy impact each year. Now, I do want to mention that this excludes growth. It excludes any new grant announcements. It excludes other sources of revenues and any other expenditure savings that we should find. So I don't want anyone to construe this as meaning it's going to be a 3 to 4% tax increase each year. This is just the isolated impact of the capital and the reserve transfers that are needed in order to fund the capital plan.
Any questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor?
I see, first of all, Councillor Kaur. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to the Deputy Treasurer. What is the interest rate that we're paying on our debt?
It ranges from, I'm going to look it up. I think it's ranging from about 3 to 4%. It depends on when the debenture was taken out and what the rate was at that point in time. So if you just give me a minute, I'll take a quick look.
Just looking at, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Treasurer, what would the biggest debenture would be the MCC? What would that interest rate be?
1 second. So the MCC, there are three debentures. Well, yeah, there are three debentures. So it's around 3.3, 3.2, and the one for the donation pledges was 1.98.
Okay. What, yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the deputy, what impact or what percentage would have a negative impact if it went up to 5 to 6%? Would that throw all these numbers off?
Well, that's a good question. Sorry, I shouldn't say it that way. I don't have a specific rate that would throw it off per se, because there are so many assumptions that are built into the budget. But I think the forecast right now, we have it in here at 4. Just double checking. Yeah, so the estimate right now is that the debentures that would be taken out are 10 years at 4%. So we have a little bit of room. Like right now, the highest debenture rate that we have is 4.05, and that was one that was taken out in 2011. So we have tried to build some conservatism into that forecast. So likewise, if we obtain a lower interest rate than what we've put in that forecast, if we obtain lower than 4%, then, you know, when you see that debt as a percent of own source revenues, it would actually be lower than what's in that graph.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, my last question. So we did have some little bit of leverage of 1.something% if the interest rates do go up.
Yes, yeah, we have tried to build in a little bit of a safety there because it's unknown at this time what it will be in the future, but they are predicting increasing interest rates.
Yes, thank you very much, and great presentation.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, just so that this doesn't come across as a self-serving comment, I'll point out that I was not on council when some really important decisions were made, and some very wise ones too. And the setting of the amounts for the debt and the reserves was a very wise move, I think. And looking back over the last year, I think the idea of resisting, I'm not going to say eliminating debt, but resisting debt at all costs has worked out to a pretty positive result here. And I can see it in the chart number 78 there at the bottom, where it goes on to show the amount of increase in the tax levy from capital at 3.6 up to 3.1%. And I just think that the idea of reducing eliminating debt as an option for us has worked out really well. The increase year over year I see in 2024 to 2026 in the capital expenditures, it's 127,727. I think it comes to a round number of around 625. To avoid that debt, what would it take to year over year over the next 6 years or so to avoid that? And I suppose it's probably an interest rate or an increase of, I'd suppose 1% a year. Would that do it? I'm asking the deputy treasurer.
Charlotte?
Well,
you see line B?
The best thing I could estimate is right now in the forecast, there's $2 million of debt in 2024. So in the 2023 budget, there would be $2 million of debt approved. And then the following year, 1 million. And then the following year, 3.8 million. So it would actually be much higher than a 1% increase in order to eliminate all that debt, because we would need to or finding grants. You know, there are other options. Like I know the treasurer's focus has really been on trying to pursue grant funding. That's a key strategy in order to try to reduce the debt. So I think that's one option, but to increase the reserve transfers enough to avoid $2 million next year, it would be a very significant tax levy impact.
Okay. Thank you for that. Well, I just want to say thank you to the staff and the CAO and the leadership team for putting this budget together. I think there's tremendous work gone into it, and my colleagues on the council for their foresight and direction in setting this as the course for what I consider still a precarious situation, because we still have things like pandemic, climate change, and inflation ahead of us, and I think those are significant unpredictables, and we have our dangerous levels of reserves for roads, facilities, and fleet, and I think we made a transition here. I said at the meeting of the Finance and Audit meeting that these forecasts that are presented like this have moved us from more of a tactical type of a response to things to a more strategic response. And I think that'll always be a good thing. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? If I may, I'll ask Deputy Treasurer Charlotte. Going back to the interest rates raised by Councillor Kaur, obviously, I thought that when we took out debentures, it was something like a mortgage, that the interest rates were locked in for obviously a certain amount of time. Do you have the am I wrong on that? I mean, they can't, they don't adjust yearly, surely.
Yes, that is correct. So the interest rates on the existing debentures that we have are established, but the line that we are discussing here, that's the increase in debt payments in the future, is based on forecast debentures. So those debentures haven't been approved yet by council. They haven't been taken out, and we don't know what the interest rates would be at that future date when they take them out.
Excellent.
So I was speaking towards what would happen if 2 years from now interest rates are higher than what they are right now. What would be the impact on the town's debt payments? And that's difficult to say, but we have tried to implement a little bit of a buffer in case there is a slight increase. But if there was a significant increase, then that would have a greater impact.
Excellent. That's what I thought. I thought that the debentures that we have now are locked in at what they are, but obviously the future is indeed the future. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Not seen or hearing. Go back to you, Deputy.
So with the next section here, this is the budget open house request that was done on September 13th. And I just want to provide council with an update on what the decision was with the requests that were made. The Pelham Active Transportation Committee requested 2 summer students for assistance with the preparation of the web and print-based information, updating maps, the development and delivery of pedestrian and cycling programming and trail maintenance. So the total cost was approximately $28,000, of which $15,000 is included in the 2022 operating budget. And the GIS coordinator can update the maps for the web information. The Gypsy Moth delegation request, there was a request for more funds allocated to the Gypsy Moth spraying for an additional 181 hectares. The current operating budget is $150,000 for Gypsy Moth management. This would bring, if we were to consider this request, it would bring the budget to $316,000. So right now, the decision that was made for the 2022 operating budget is that the additional $166,000 requested is not included in the 2022 budget. Pickleball delegation request, they requested 6 pickleball courts at Centennial Park. These would be 6 new courts, and the cost for the 6 courts is approximately $480,000. A grant application to Ontario Trillium Foundation was submitted on September 28th, and the project will proceed if the funding is received. And the funding for this project is at 100% if we do get it. So I don't know, are there any questions with this slide?
Any questions on what's on the screen now from any councillors? Not hearing any, Madam Treasurer?
Okay, the next two items that came from the budget open house is the Pelham Minor Baseball Association. At Centennial Park, Diamond 2 required the foul ball netting. The existing diamond is lit, but it is not ideal for hardball play due to the incident of foul balls. They hit the neighboring properties. The addition of the foul ball netting will allow for hardball play and increase the use of the field. The total cost of $25,000 is included in the 2022 park capital budget to be funded from the reserves. And the last request that was made from the Pelham Minor Baseball Association was to install a batting cage at Centennial Park for training purposes. The cost of $40,000 is included in the 2022 park capital budget, but it is red circled for grant funding. If a grant is received, this project will move forward. And this concludes the budget open house requests that were made on September 13th.
Thank you. Any comments on the last two items? Not seeing any. Madam Treasurer?
Yeah, and then the last final slide we have here is the recommendation that the committee receives the 2022 capital budget presentation by the Treasurer, Deputy Treasurer, and Director of Public Works for information, and that the committee receives the 10-year capital forecast for information, and that committee recommend to council to approve the 2022 capital budget at their meeting scheduled for December 20th, 2021. And this concludes the presentation.
Thank you for the presentation to you and the Deputy Treasurer and the Public Works. Very detailed. We appreciate that and the hours that it took to put that together for the town staff. To you, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. As the treasurer said, that does conclude her presentation. Council is aware of the recommendation associated with that presentation. However, we'll move to committee input first to see if council has any other input that they'd like to see in the budget before we bring this recommendation to a vote, if that's okay with Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any other comments on the presentation? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion prepared, and then I'm going to make a comment with regards to the motion. It has to do with LED lights. And my motion is that the committee directs staff to investigate the feasibility of including LED light street light conversion project for 2022, and that the committee directs staff to present project options which have no capital spending increase for the 2022 budget, and that the committee directs staff to report back to council by December the 20th. And I'd like to make some comments with regards to that. One of the areas that I think we can start, because I don't want to increase the capital budget, because obviously we just heard a great presentation on the budget and our tax rate, and neither of which I want to go up, is the fact that right now, every time we go out to repair street lights, we've got a budget coming up with operating budget of $60,000. In my area, in the last few months, corner of Lawrence and Deborah, the maintenance company had to come out 3 times on these 37-year-old lamps to make the repair. I'm sure by the time we got there for the second time trying to repair it, we could have easily replaced the lights. You know, if we started the process of replacing lights rather than repairing lights, we could replace 85 lights. That would give us 6% of our lights converted just on the repair budget. Now, I'm not sure we can do it all the time, but that's a consideration. Obviously, I'd like to see more than lights in that converted, but I think with a payback of 4 years over the whole lifetime, if we could do it all at one time, this is one of those projects that will pay itself back in dividends coming in the future years. So that's why I'm presenting this motion tonight. Thank you.
Okay, and before I go to council, and thank you for that, Councillor Hildebrand. Before I go to council members, let's hear from Public Works Director Jason Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I agree that an LED streetlight conversion program is important for the town to undertake. There are savings that will be realized with the conversion program, which will stem from reduced maintenance costs as well as reduced usage costs for electricity. So I guess staff are generally in support of the motion that's going to come forward. We have done some investigations and legwork on this program. As I said, right now it sits in the capital forecast as a budget line item in 2023 and 2024, where we would look at replacing all 1,322 streetlights with LED lights as part of a conversion program over 2 years. Those costs, because there's a lot of unknowns at this point in time with respect to the type of fixtures that need to be replaced, whether or not we need new arms. There are some unknowns at this point in time. So I believe those forecasted amounts of $600,000 in 2023 and $600,000 in 2024 is probably a conservative approach. With that being said, I understand the councillor would like to look at doing a streetlight conversion program without adding additional dollars to the capital ask in 2022. So I believe that staff can take this direction, come back with a report as part of the December 20th meeting with some options for council's consideration on moving ahead with a streetlight conversion program starting in 2022, which may involve a 2-year program, 3-year program, but I think there's some opportunities there. I think there is some cost savings that we can be realized from other projects that could help fund this particular program.
Okay, thank you for that, Director Marr. Councillor Olson, you had your hand up first. And sir, there wouldn't be a night without you being on mute.
Yeah, it would be a perfect end, a perfect day, wouldn't it? Yes, Mr. Mayor, if a seconder is required, I'd be happy to do that. I think it's time we got started on this, and I've done projects like this in the past where I sought funding assistance, and I got assistance which I paid back through the savings, and perhaps there's something like that. I don't propose we take on any debt, but there are possibilities for funding of a project like this, and if you do the funding properly and you get the payback under a couple of years, I mean, it's, let's just get it started.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, we are in committee and therefore no seconder is needed, just the mover.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, no problem. Councillor Corey, you had your hand up.
Yes, I fully agree with Councillor Hildebrand. We got to start somewhere. And even if we start with 20 to 40 lights per year, in 5 years, we could get most of it done. So I really recommend that we approve this and move forward with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is moved by Councillor Hildebrand. And as there's no more debate, I'll start the vote with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, you can continue with committee input.
Any other comments, questions from committee members on the overall report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that committee receive the 2022 capital budget presentation by the Treasurer, Deputy Treasurer, and Director of Public Works for information, and that committee receive the 10-year capital forecast for information, and that committee recommend to council to approve the 2022 capital budget at their meeting scheduled for December 20th, 2021. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any further debate, or would you like me to call the vote?
We'll go to the council one more time. Last chance, councillors. Any other further comments or questions? I'm sorry, Councillor Stewart, is that your hand I see?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation to accept the budget on the 20th, is that as it stands right now, or would it be with any amendments? Because we do have some reports coming in at the meeting on the 20th. I just want to be clear.
Yes.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation does indicate that the budget will be approved as is. However, staff do realize that there are reports to come forward, and I will work with the CAO to ensure procedurally that council is given the opportunity to make sure that they can lift the recommendations and make any changes that they wish. So you certainly still have the ability to make changes at the December 20th if you so wish as a council.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to adjournment, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart that the special meeting of committee be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion?
Any discussion on the adjournment? Not seeing any.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. It is 7:49, Mr. Mayor, and you can adjourn your meeting.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Good night, all.